Today we're featuring debut novelist Rob Samborn, and he's definitely of like-minded spirit. Welcome, Rob, and congrats on your debut novel.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, and thanks for the congratulations. It's been an incredible journey.
I'm sure it has, and it's a really special time. So a little bit about Rob. In addition to being a novelist, he is also a screenwriter, an entrepreneur, and an avid traveler like me. He has been to more countries than me. I counted. He's been to 40 countries, lived in 5 of them, including Italy, where this book takes place, and studied 9 languages. As a restless spirit who can't remember the last time he was bored, I hate boredom too. Rob is on a quest to explore the intricacies of our world and try his hand at a multitude of crafts. He's also an artist and a musician and is a budding furniture maker. So he's a native New Yorker who lived in New York for a while and then Los Angeles for 20 years. And he now makes his home in Denver with his wife and daughter and dog. And I fell in love with this book, The Prisoner of Paradise. Just a few reviews and then we'll get to questions. So Lex Allen, reader's favorite reviewer, says The Prisoner of Paradise is the winner, combining romance, historical, metaphysical, and conspiracy elements into a thriller that supersedes several of today's best-selling authors is no easy task. However, Samborn's, and it's Samborn, S-A-M-B-O-R-N, that I don't want people Googling Rob because I know you're all going to do it to make the same mistake I did the first couple of times. Samborn's skill shines through its smooth flow, akin to that of the great names in thriller fiction. And boy, are these some names. Poe to Ludlum, Kuntz to Child, and yes, Dan Brown. So that's Lex Allen, a reader's favorite reviewer. Our Town Book Reviews, a reviewer named another Kathy, says a beautiful arrangement woven together to create a story of theft, betrayal, transgressions, and even love. Amy McElroy, who's a book blogger, says this book is brilliant. The plot is fantastic, unlike anything I've previously read. A fast-paced story full of action, intrigue, religion, art, and a secret order. You name it, this book has it. And Shanessa Gloom, who you may remember from a previous story hour, says The Prisoner of Paradise is an immersive, otherworldly tale of forbidden love, a dangerous brotherhood, and a most unusual purgatory, I'll say. Spanning for centuries from Renaissance Venice to modern day, Samborn invites his readers to unravel a vast conspiracy of secrets, murder, and trapped souls in this rousing and thought-provoking thriller. And finally, mine, an engrossing tale that spans centuries of Venetian history, art, and social mores. The Prisoner of Paradise is full of intrigue and angst, focusing on the heroic choices we strive to make, the sins we feel compelled to pursue, and the gray area of right and wrong that bridges all our crucial decisions about life and love. So those are some reviews, Rob. Congrats. What and where inspired your novel? And when did you start thinking about it?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for reading all those reviews to me. Actually, no one had ever read them aloud to me before. And
isn't it cool?
It gave me chills.
And the reviews really say what the book is about. They really do.
And I've been very fortunate to have amazing reviews, and I'm so grateful for all of my early reviewers, and including yourself, of course, and everybody. And now that it's out, more reviews, really positive reviews, are coming in. So I am very grateful to everybody for that. And in answer to your trip, What inspired the book, so I actually came up with this idea years ago on my very first trip to Venice.
Mhm.
And I was actually inspired by a different painting by the artist Jacopo Tintoretto. And then, so for the viewers, by the way, the book is called The Prisoner of Paradise, and the paradise in The Prisoner of Paradise is the name of a painting by a Renaissance master named Tintoretto, and it was completed in 1592. And it's the world's largest oil painting. It's about 75 feet wide by about 25 feet high. It's huge. It's bigger than a lot of houses. It's
It's
absolutely
gorgeous
gigantic.
too. It is
Yeah,
so gorgeous.
it is. And it depicts the coronation of Mary in heaven, and it has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in it. So now what inspired me actually was a different Tintoretto painting in a different place. So Paradise is in the Doge's Palace in Venice, which is now a museum. The painting that inspired it is another one by Tintoretto called The Crucifixion, which is about the crucifixion, obviously. And that's in a place called the Scuola Grande di San Rocco. So that painting is also very, very big. It's about 40 by maybe 15 or 18 feet. So it's also a huge painting, not quite as mammoth as Paradise. And that painting has about 75 to 100 different individuals in it. So when I saw this, first of all, I should say that Tintoretto's work is incredible. He's not a household name like a Da Vinci or a Michelangelo, but he's definitely like in the top 10 of the Renaissance. So anyone who studied art history, for example, knows him. So he's definitely up there. And his work always blows me away every time I ever see it. It just imbues and evokes so much visceral emotion in literally every single thing. I mean, the content is incredible. His work is amazing. His brushstrokes. He was known as the furious painter because he worked so fast, but he put so much emotion into his work. And in this particular painting, there's just so many people in it. And each one is a very distinct individual. There's all different ages, all different races. And so I started thinking, like, who were these people that they got immortalized into this painting? And so, of course, I knew that artists use models, but I was wondering if they used them to that degree. If you had 75 people, waiting outside the door and he was doing all these portraits. I don't know, probably not, especially not in Paradise. There's just too many people for that. So, but the idea that they were immortalized, all these individual people, right? So like these were not commissioned portraits of nobility. So that got me thinking, like, who were these people? And then I was thinking, okay, maybe there were souls that were captured, and that's how they got immortalized into the painting. And there's a
That's
little
a
bit more of
big
a story.
leap. That's a big leap. So and you thought of that in that moment as you were doing it?
No, I think I thought of it after I saw it. So the painting really stuck with me. And then, I couldn't get this idea of how they got immortalized into the painting out of my head.
Cool.
And then when I started doing research on Tintoretto and that particular painting, I then found Paradise, or really Paradise found me, to be honest with you. And I saw this and I was just like, God, this is like absolutely perfect for what I want to do here. Yeah.
It is kind of like a whole city in a painting.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the characters, the people, the models are from different times if you look closely.
Oh, they absolutely are, because it's heaven. And so you have everybody from present day Venice, and some of them, actually, I did do the research on this, some of them were based on kind of like a who's who of Venice of the day, and they did indeed want to be immortalized. But there's hundreds of people. So it goes all the way back to, Jerusalem of 0 CE, I guess.
I have to see this painting now.
Yeah,
I do, now that I've read your book.
So you have all these different people, and there's angels and everything. So there are a lot of people spanning hundreds of years of time. Exactly. It's interesting. I'll admit, in my head, of course, wondered if the story that I came up with about this painting is actually true. I don't know. I know it's not, but
well, it could be.
Right, because it's just
we
the
don't know
painting.
everything.
Yeah, and in person, it's incredible because it's also set up, I think, about maybe 15 feet off the floor. And the room that it's in at one point was the largest room in all of Europe, if not the world, when it was constructed. And so when you see this painting that's this gigantic, it's just phenomenal. Yeah, it's pretty awe-inspiring.
So the painting itself inspired the book, and
Yes.
um, so I've read a lot of your great reviews, but I know as an author myself, there's always something that I wish an interviewer would ask me about my book. And I'm wondering, is there anything that you want a reader to know about your novel that hasn't been said in the reviews or in early publicity?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. There is, I think, I mean, some of the reviews touch on this, but it's that I do want readers to know that it's a novel that can't really be pigeonholed. It's often compared to other books, particularly like Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code or Diana Gabaldon's Outlander. There are elements of those, and of course, they're both incredible authors. And there's just so much that I've read or seen that has been inspiration. But I do think it's really quite unique. And again, some of the reviews did touch on this, but it really resonates with a lot of different people because there's so many different aspects of the book. We most often call it a thriller blended with historical fiction and magical realism or fantasy. And so it does have all of those pieces, but even more, at the heart of it, I think it's really a love story. So I
Yeah,
have heard a lot of people, a lot like Shores of Our Souls, of course,
yeah,
is
it
a love
is.
story, but
It is.
there's a lot of different aspects of it. It's also a multi-genre book. So I have heard a lot of people say that they like different things of it, which is really amazing to me because that's the stuff that I like to watch, right? It's like, I don't want to just like pinpoint on one particular thing that's just like, oh, I just like this. So I love hearing that. And also the other thing that I want readers to know is that it takes you on a journey. And also it's the first part of a journey. So this is the first of at least a 3-book series.
Well, that makes only good sense considering your entire life has been a journey, that your books would be a journey as well. Um,
So yeah.
I can't imagine a book that I wrote not having the place be a sort of character.
Mhm.
So um, I'm excited to read number 2.
Thanks.
What's the name of it? Do you have a working title?
I do. It's actually the finalized title. It's called The Painter of Paradise.
Ah,
So
okay.
we're going
Oh,
from the
I know.
prisoner of paradise to the painter of paradise.
Okay, that's really, I'm intrigued because I have a feeling I know who that might be, but I might be wrong.
The 3rd book title is still a secret. That we'll do a title reveal at some point in the future.
Okay. So when you began writing The Prisoner of Paradise, what genre did you want it to be in at the time you started writing, and did that change as you wrote?
I'm very glad you asked this question, and I
It's
actually could
very
ask the
much cross
same.
genre. It is.
Yeah, and I could ask the same question to you as well for The
Uh-huh.
Shores of Our Souls. To be honest, I wasn't thinking about genre at all. And I don't know if a lot of readers, or even if a lot of writers know this, but the publishing industry is kind of allergic to cross-genre material.
They are.
And, that
We've
really
discussed
surprised
it
me.
on this show before because
Yeah,
I love cross genre writers.
me
And I
too.
think our publisher does too. I think that
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'd love to just do a quick shout out to Sherry Williams and the entire Touchpoint team, and also my agents, Amy Ashcraft and Kimberly Brower of Brower Literary and Management, for believing in me and the book. And, they're all aware that there is this kind of apprehension about cross-genre material. But it just is, it's still to this day very surprising to me.
the
Um,
readers love it.
Exactly. I know it comes from libraries and bookstores needing a way to categorize it, and a place to put it in the shelves. I get that, but I do think it's changing because, I mean, so much of what I read and watch, I really feel like almost everything is cross-genre, unless you're getting um, I guess like a really straight up romance novel or something like that, some straight up like detective story or genre book where you can really fit it into one category. But even with those, there's so many subcategories. I mean, so like with mine, for example, it's part fantasy, but it's really, there's only really 1 or 2 small aspects of it that are then put into the real world that are fantasy. So I looked up all the different subcategories of fantasy. There's like 60. you know, and every single subcategory is cross-genre, right? So it's like you wouldn't put this into the same shelf as Lord of the Rings, as high
Right.
fantasy. Yeah,
Right.
so we did end up settling on magical realism because the fantastical elements do take place in the real world. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing. I do think it's changing. I mean, also with TV and movies, so much is cross-genre.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I agree that it's changing. And to answer your, and also a shout out, a mutual shout out to Touchpoint, who believes in you and me and our work and so many other wonderful authors, and have given them a platform and a voice. And in terms of my novel, I really just saw it as straight women's fiction to begin with. I really did. I knew I wanted it to be about love and war,
Mhm.
like Hemingway wrote about love and war. And what I didn't know going in was that it would be typecast romance, because it's not a romance.
Yeah,
It is in a loose way, but it's not like, it's not, it's an atypical romance at best,
Mhm.
because it doesn't have a Cinderella ending.
It
And
also doesn't have Fabio on the cover.
yeah, this is true too. So when you were in Venice and you saw this painting and you said, I've got to write about this painting, were you excited that Venice would be part of the locale? And maybe tell us about your other travels and how you did. In other words, the painting drew you in, but you must have fallen in love with Venice as you went along and researched the painting.
100%. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I have been to 40 countries, every continent but Antarctica,
Mhm.
and Italy as a country is definitely up there, and you know, it's one of my favorite countries. I could easily live there. I love it every single time I go. It's amazing. And Venice. So I know that some people, when they go, they don't love it, and that's because I think maybe they go in high season, like at the height of the summer, so it can get pretty hot, and there can be millions of tourists. So it does have that aspect, but I would encourage everybody, if they have the means and the way to get there, because it really is an absolutely incredible, treasured place in the world. There's no other place like it. For those of you who've never been there, it's a city that was built about 1,000 years ago on a marsh. So there was nothing there. And the original Venetians went there to basically to escape being killed by barbarians. Sorry, by barbarians. And ultimately, they built this city on a marsh, and they figured out to put in thousands of planks, massive poles that would then get embedded into the ground at the bottom of the water, and then they would become petrified. And there are millions of these poles beneath the city. And then they built a city of marble on
Yeah,
top of it with
yeah.
all these canals. And still to this day, there's only two modes of transportation, which are by foot or by boat. And then the city itself became incredibly prosperous. So at one time, it was the biggest mercantile power in the world. You know, just this incredible merchant and trading capital, is essentially the capital of trade for all of Europe coming from the East. And they just became incredibly wealthy and powerful and built these incredible buildings and incredible churches and all this amazing art. So then you take that and you make it this kind of serpentine city where it's almost like a maze. It really is a maze. I
It
shouldn't say
is
it's
amazing.
almost like a maze.
I've never
Yeah.
been to Venice. I've been to Tuscany, but I've read a lot of books about Venice and seen a lot of maps.
Yes.
It's amazing that way.
Yeah. So it's like take a city like Florence and put it into the water with all these like tight little alleys. So for me to answer your question, yes, I was extremely excited to write about Venice. I honestly think there's a story around every corner in Venice. You just look at a particular building, and you're just like, wow, what's that carved into on the side? Like, why is that kind of bas relief there, that type of thing, and then all the art. So yeah, it's truly an absolutely remarkable place.
So I think it's time for audience questions.
Hello, everybody. We do have some audience questions today, and we have some hellos, of course. We have a hello to both of you from Shanessa. She says hi. Kathy Rogers is also in. She says hello, or she said she was a little late to the show, actually, but
well, you actually were.
On her behalf, I'm saying she says hello. Anyway, our first question is from Shanessa, and she is asking, and saying, there were so many interesting characters in this book. Who's your favorite character to write?
That's a great question, Shanessa, and hi. And thanks for asking that. So that is a tough question, I think, for me to answer. Although I do think I end up liking to write the antagonists a little bit more. I think the bad guys could be pretty nuanced and interesting, to know like why are they doing these things. And actually, maybe I might choose. So the main antagonist, his name is Salvatore Della Porta, and he's actually the director of the museum where the painting Paradise is for the audience. And we find out that he does become the bad guy. Hopefully, I'm not spoiling anything, but he's not like one of these James Bond villains who's just out to control the world. What he wants to do is very nuanced. But there's another character who actually might be my favorite. His name is Enzo Paganelli. Both of these characters take place in the present. They're set in the present. So for the audience, about 35% of the book does take place in the 16th century, and the remainder takes place in the present day. So there's a character named Paganelli, who is a mysterious character, and we don't really know what he's up to, what his motivations are, and why he's doing things that seemingly help the main character, but at times actually also seem to thwart him. So I really enjoyed writing him because he's one of these characters who really lives in the shadows. And there were a lot of layers to him that I needed to reveal and unravel to the audience. And actually, we find out considerably more about him in the second book as well. So I'm going to go with Paganelli.
A great character, and so many shades to him. So many shades. I agree.
All right. So our second question is from Tatiana Ramsoff, and she's asking, is there an actual woman in the painting Paradise that you base your character on? If so, when you viewed the painting, did she speak to you as your character does in your book?
Yes, but in the inverse. So I wanted to find somebody who actually would represent this woman. So she is in the painting. I've thought about maybe posting something like on my website or social media. Maybe I will in the end as to who she is, but I kind of want it right now to be in people's imaginations. But yes, there is indeed a particular person in the painting who I did base it on. And also I described her looks based upon that particular person. So I didn't know her looks to begin with. And yeah, to a degree, I don't want to sound as crazy as, not crazy, but like my main character, but she does speak to me. But the thing is that all the characters speak to me. And I feel like any writer does go through this where the characters do indeed take on lives of their own.
They take over.
Yeah, and that's actually why the book itself did become a series. I never had the intention of writing it as a series. It was always a standalone. But the characters, as an author, unless you kill them, or they want to retire or something like that, they want to keep living and doing what they're doing. So that is actually how it became a trilogy.
That's really cool. If there's anything I've learned from being on this show with Kathy and talking with all of these authors is that characters, like you said, do live in your head, and it does just require listening to them. And They're their own little force. So that's all we have for questions right now.
Okay, keep them coming, everybody. I'm going to keep on with my questions. So I know that there are places in the novel that are real, and I know the story behind the island, or part of the story, because I think you wrote me an email about it at one point. But first of all, did figuring out the map of your story, map in air quotes, not the map of Venice, take a lot of research, or did it come naturally during your trips to Venice? And that island, that was just an amazing, probably it's right there and everybody can see it, but you made it into this mystical place.
Thanks. Yeah, I think you're talking about Poveglia Island.
I am, and I'm sorry that I
Yeah,
didn't,
that's yeah.
I don't speak Italian well enough. I would have butchered it. And
That's okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Because Venice itself is an island. In fact, it's made up of something like 60 islands. But yeah, the island that you're talking about is Poveglia. And so for the viewers out there who haven't read the book yet, so most of it is set in the city of Venice, but at one point they go to this other island called Poveglia Island, which at one point was a plague island for internment. In fact, it's kind of what was really interesting about this. So I did write the book before the COVID-19 pandemic, and I did put in past plague stuff like bubonic plague and other types of plagues. So Venice is no stranger to plagues and pandemics. In fact, they've probably, because the city is so cramped, and there were a lot of rats on ships and stuff like that, that they got hit with plagues and pandemics all the time. And it's really kind of interesting. I mean, you talk about masks and lockdowns. This dates back hundreds of years. And the city of Venice was actually a republic, and they were a republic for 1,000 years. And they had to lock this, and when I say lock this, I mean, they had to get a handle on plagues and pandemics at a very, imagine like with medicine back then, it was like, if you got it, you basically died. So they had to have lockdowns, and the masks, we've all seen the pictures of the plague doctor masks with the beaks and stuff like that. They came up with this a long time ago because I don't want to get into this, but like there's a reason why they came up with it. So there was one particular island called Poveglia, where if you did get the plague, you were actually sent there. And so there was a plague hospital. It's been since shut down, but it does play a role in the book because it's a remarkable place. And now it's actually reputed to be the most haunted island in the world. So there are some specials that you can see, like ghost hunters and stuff like that they go to Poveglia, and it's legal to go there, but people take boats and stuff to go out there, and like they'll stay overnight. So it's pretty interesting. And yeah, so that's a real place. In fact, all the places in the book are real. All the artwork is real, and many of the figures from the past are real as well. We were talking about cross genre before, and how the fantastical aspect of my book I call magical realism, because it's not Lord of the Rings fantasy, right? It's just for the viewers out there, the idea is that I don't think we actually talked about what the book is about really, but it's the main character, his name is Nick O'Connor. He comes to believe that his true soulmate is not his wife, but a woman who's been trapped in this Renaissance painting paradise that we've been talking about. And she's one of the people of all these souls in there. And he stumbles upon a secret society who, over hundreds of years, has developed a technique to extract people's souls from their bodies, and then they put them in paradise as a purgatory of sorts.
Yay.
So he goes on this quest to free her, but freeing her means freeing all of them. And the secret society says that all these souls are evil. Whether that's true or not, you have to read the book and make your own decision. So that's the fantasy aspect of it, but everything else is real. So it was really important to me that everything, all the locations are real. Many of the historical figures are real as well.
It's very realistically done. It could be actually happening, and I'm certain that's why it's more magical realism than fantasy, because and it's historic. Can you let us backstage a little bit in terms of, did you get your primary characters first? Did you look at the painting and say, okay, that's going to be a character in the book? Because the painting does come alive. And I'm just wondering how it evolved, because it's complex plot.
Yeah, sometimes with my work, I start with characters, but in this particular case, I did start with plot. And then I found the best characters for that plot. So the main character, Nick O'Connor, he's an American, and his wife, Julie O'Connor, she's American as well. Originally, so going backstage, originally they were both pretty different. So in the book now, he is like a software developer, but he plays hockey just like as a hobby. And actually, so for the audience as well, he does sustain a massive injury, a head injury, before they go on the trip. So we see this in the backstory of the trip. It happens off scene.
Which is another thing that makes it quite believable.
Yeah, so because also, so he thinks that he's starting to hear voices from the painting. His wife, Julia, is obviously very concerned about him. He was in a coma for a couple of days before they went on the trip. And so she thinks that he's has a major brain injury. So she's very worried for him. So originally, though, in the book, going backstage, he was actually a professional hockey player. And there was a lot more in the story about that. In fact, I think the book itself initially started in the middle of a hockey game, and we saw him getting hit. But my agents decided and they swayed me to make him, more of like an everyman kind of person, where he's really just playing hockey, as a hobby for fun in an amateur league, and to make him also a little bit more of a fish out of water. And the other thing is they wanted me to bring everything to Venice as soon as possible. So it starts in Venice. There are no scenes that are not in Venice, and also to get to the action a little bit faster. So we kind of like progressed everything.
That's interesting. Do you think it changed anything, not having him be a hockey star?
It changed it for the better. So I do think it was a really good idea at the end of the day. One thing that maybe I would have preferred is that he's a well-known hockey. Yeah, so he's not just a regular hockey. I mean, he's a hockey player, but he's like a star in the original version.
Right.
So there are some people who recognize him, for example, some other American tourists. And interestingly enough, when I first wrote this, which was a while ago at this point, social media did exist, but it did not exist to the point that it does now. So, and I did actually have some scenes where, because he has these kind of reactions in the museum where he thinks he's being spoken to by a painting, right? And there's another tourist who actually recognizes him and takes pictures and stuff like that. So I think that nowadays it would have been an even bigger part of it. But I do think that probably would have interfered with the main plot to a degree.
I'm thinking in terms of everyman.
Yeah.
In
terms of that, I do think that was a very good decision, because he's such a fish out of water in the story. He really needs to think on his feet. The reader goes on the journey with him. There are times when he has absolutely no idea what to do, and I think the reader would be right there with him, making those decisions.
I certainly was. So I was surprised on Amazon, your Amazon description, that you said he was a man on the brink of insanity, but you just explained that. I never doubted his sanity. Maybe that says something about me, but I didn't. I think you really made him plausible and likable and believable. Yet when I read that, I thought, is there an underlying reason that he's seeing what he's seeing? I mean, if it weren't, because reality is people argue that it's a matrix anyway, right?
Right.
There are people that do that. So is the painting symbolic of his mind?
Hmm. That's a great question. And so first of all, I didn't actually write that. I believe, I'm pretty positive my agents wrote that.
Okay, well, it's not true. You can tell them.
Yeah. And though, so I do think that the painting is symbolic of his mind in the sense that it's a tumultuous ocean, his mind, right? And the painting is as well. Like if you look at this painting, if you were to step back from the painting, it actually looks more like an ocean than a bunch of people. But if you go closer up, it is all these people almost stampeding Jesus and Mary in reverence. So it's kind of like that. And I do think that his mind is like that. But as I mentioned, I mean, he does suffer a traumatic brain injury. It does happen.
And he's
off screen
afraid
prior
of
to
losing his mind. He is.
Yeah, and also
And
the other
people
thing,
accuse him of losing his
they
mind,
do. But even once he has the
including his
conviction,
wife.
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire book, in fact, so she never believes what's happening
Mm.
for the entire book. But I do think that what's happening is that he has the conviction that it's real, right? But this is tearing him apart, emotionally and mentally. So I do think that he is kind of on the brink of insanity in that respect, whether it's real or not. And imagine another person occupying your brain. So I don't think I'm giving too much away in terms of spoilers, but for the audience, he starts to have regressions back to the 16th century to a past life. And that past life is a Venetian swordsman. And I can talk about this because I think it's in the description on Amazon. So that the Venetian swordsman was tasked to do something and basically have an affair with this woman, but he ended up falling in love with her, and she's the woman in the painting, and they fell in love because they're soulmates. And now 7 lives later, or really 6 lives later actually, Nick is back as the current life, and is with his soulmate there.
And he has to choose.
He has to choose, right? So, and that's exactly what I was getting at. So thank you. Which is that's another thing that I think is really tearing him apart, that he's torn between his true soulmate and a woman who he loves very, very much. So he does have that tearing him apart.
So I love the art history in the book. I love the history. So that made me think, if art was one character, a main character, and Venice was another main character, which would be the protagonist, which would be the antagonist? Or would they both be on the same team?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, Kathy.
Especially this particular art. It's definitely forbidding, and it has a very dark side.
Yes, it does. And I definitely don't want to give anything away that happens in the second book, because you might want to ask me this question again. I think right now, I would say they're both on 2 sides of the same coin, maybe. And I did do that intentionally, not just with the city and art, but other aspects as well. You could say there is a lot of gray area between right and wrong and good and evil. And a lot of the book is about that. I want readers to interpret it as they want, particularly characters' actions and decisions. So my answer is that they are both on 2 sides of the same coin.
I like that answer because it's what I thought it would be, but I wasn't sure that you would answer that way. I love the answer. It makes me happy.
Your question makes me happy.
So do you think, and I'm excited that it might be a segue into the second book. Do you think Venice has changed much in the 450 years that the novel spans?
So I'm not an expert on Venice. I have been there 3 times, and I've obviously done a lot of considerable research. I think you actually asked me about research before, and yes, I have spent hours and hours and hours researching it. I did go to Venice. I apologize for not answering that part of the question.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, so I guess I can put it in here. I did take a research trip to Venice. but that was after at least the first draft was done. And otherwise, though, you know, thank God for the internet, because I have no idea how writers pre-internet did their research. I guess they went to the
National
library.
Geographic, no I'm kidding.
Yeah, or the
But you
library,
did a lot of
or
primary
they
research.
went. But there are lots of little things. You know, I would spend hours and hours on something that might, at the end of the day, have 5 words in the book, like fashion, for example. You know, because I wanted to put that in. So I don't know anything about 16th century Venetian fashion. But to actually answer this question, has Venice changed? Venetians may disagree with me on this, but I'd say relative to other cities in the world, not much really at all. You know, so the primary economy has shifted in the past 450 years to tourism, but that actually happened starting in the late 18th century. So tourism has been the major economy of Venice for a couple of hundred years now. And prior to that, there were always visitors, as I mentioned before, you know, since it was such a huge merchant and trading capital. And many of the buildings, they've existed for hundreds of years. On that trip, actually, that I was talking about, the research trip, I specifically wanted to, so I got an Airbnb, and we specifically stayed in, I think, a 500-year-old apartment. Fortunately, the plumbing had been updated and things like that, but you had, you know, all these old rafters and everything, and the windows had like these cranks that were difficult to open. And I think one of the big reasons for the lack of change is that there are no motor vehicles allowed in the city, except boats. Those are the only motorized vehicles. So in fact, there are no 2-wheeled vehicles. You can't even ride a bike. So you still have the exact same mode of transportation that's existed since the birth of Venice, which is walking or water. And you know, other cities have adapted to different modes of transportation and have kind of completely changed the look of them. Now, of course, with climate change and the age of the city itself, before, you know, I mentioned that the city is actually built on these pylons, and so you have, and it's marble. So you have the city itself sinking a little bit into that sediment. But at the same time, you also have rising sea levels. So you can see this, where you can see the actual markers on the buildings, how the city has gone down anywhere from like 1 foot to 2 feet. It's pretty interesting. So we will see how that changes over the next 100 years. I should point out there's this organization called Save Venice, which is dedicated to helping to preserve Venice. But if anyone wants to check it out. But so yeah, so it hasn't changed that much, but hopefully it won't.
It would be so sad if it went down in just a century after so long being in existence.
Yeah.
Kaylee's a sustainability expert. She's and so we have these discussions quite a lot. I love old cities for that reason, and a lot of the cities in Europe only have old towns, but Venice is just exactly like it was. I've got to get there.
You should.
So I think we have time for a few more questions.
Yes, hello again. We do have one question from Shanessa, and she's asking if you outline your novels.
So thanks for this question, Shanessa. So as Shanessa and Kathy know, there is this kind of fun debate in the writing world between plotters and pantsers, where plotters outline their work and pantsers write by the seat of their pants and kind of just go and see where their characters take them. I am definitely a plotter. So yes, I do outline my work. I think it might come from my screenwriting background, where you definitely have much more constraints with time and page count. And I've even, so with the second and the third books, actually, I outline them together. And that outline for the second and third books, I believe, is about 65,000 words. Wow. Which is nearly novel length. But the thing is that then I find it very easy to write the scenes. So the outlines, you know, I don't always stick to those outlines.
Like a treatment. It's like a screenplay treatment then.
Yeah, kind of. And then I can just put those scenes in and then write them out. Now, obviously things do change, you know, I'll find holes, so where characters will seem like they need to go in different directions and that type of thing. But yes, so I do outline.
I'm seeing that painting, and you know, when you have a murder and there are all these strings from one perp to the possible perp to another and to another, seeing all these strings between people in the painting, that was how I visualized it. It must be quite an undertaking having an outline that long. And do you keep it all in your head?
No, no, I
Okay.
wrote that down. Although I've yet to, so I mentioned that it may go beyond 3 books. And for that, I have some notes written down, but it's in my head where I really want to take it. And it goes in an interesting direction, I think.
Any more, Kaylee?
That is all we have for right now.
Well, thank you. And thank you especially to Shanessa for those writer questions too. I think we're ready to close. I'm wondering what your plans are other than all these future books and marketing of this one, and where can people purchase the book and find you?
Yeah, so, well, the future plans definitely are about the sequels. So the second book, The Painter of Paradise, is slated for release in the fall of 2022. So yeah, so I'm definitely working on the marketing of the first one, The Prisoner of Paradise, and the second one, and also working on the third one. And then, but beyond that, if all goes well, as I mentioned, it will go to maybe 4, if not 5 books for this particular series as we follow the journeys of these characters. But I'd also love to write some spin-offs. In fact, I even started one. So the nice thing about writing a book that spans time periods, especially when you have people potentially frozen in time that get frozen at various times, is that I can actually pick any particular person from the painting and be like, okay, well, what's their story? How did they get there? And did that happen in 1837 for some particular reason? So there's 2 types of spin-offs that I want to do. Is one, I want to follow the journey of what happens to Nick's former life, Angelo. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a good story that happens with him. And then again, if all goes well, there are different stories that I want to explore that really involve like the secret society and what happens with them. So I think that would be pretty cool and fun. And then I'd also love to write children's books, actually. I have a lot of ideas for kids' books. So I have a 6-year-old daughter, and a lot of it comes from that. But I do think that kids' books are just a lot of fun.
And does she know the plot of this one?
I'm glad you asked that. So this book is very R-rated. And yeah. And
simplified version.
Yeah, she's 6 now. Yeah, it's almost NC-17. I wouldn't say it's NC-17, but it's definitely not for little kids. And but she begged me to tell her the story. So I finally broke down and told her I actually narrated the entire book in a G-rated version of it to her when I did it last year, so she was actually 5. But she was riveted. And so I did love that. And she still remembers it to this day. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
Did you record it? Did you record it?
No, I told it to her actually as like a bedtime story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over probably maybe 20 nights or something like that. So I do wish I recorded it.
Well, it's okay.
It wasn't an easy thing to do because there were so many things that I had to censor. Actually plot things too, because I didn't want to traumatize her. Let's just say not every character has a happy ending.
Well, not every character deserves a happy ending.
Right. So when you're telling that to a 5-year-old, I needed to definitely.
Once she gets to Harry Potter, she's probably almost to Harry Potter. So then you can loosen a little.
Yeah, she's almost to the first one. I mean, Harry Potter starts to get pretty dark. So, but I mean, she's been watching stuff.
My kids grew up with Harry Potter, so I know.
She has started watching stuff where people either get like their comeuppance, or I think she's watched stuff. I mean, in Disney movies, the parents die in the beginning of every single movie.
Mhm.
So she's seen it. Yeah.
Just don't get me started on Bambi. So where can people find the book? And your
Yes.
website is Rob Samborn, SAMBORN.com, correct? Or is it author.com? Okay.
No, that's it. It's robsamborn.com, and it's SAM as in Mary, B as in boy, ORN as in Nancy. So I do have links on my website to a whole bunch of places where people can buy it. It is available on Amazon as an ebook and paperback. There is going to be an audiobook coming out in a few months. So I'm really excited about that. We'll see who narrates it, because it needs to be somebody who can do accents, so that'll be fun. And a lot of different characters. And it is also a bit, if you don't want to buy from Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble. The book is The Prisoner of Paradise, and it's also on Apple Books. And if you go to my website, you'll see a bunch of links for international places as well.
It'll come. The smaller places will come. They will.
Yeah,
It's
it'll be in
early
bookstores
days,
very soon.
early
Yeah,
days.
so there has actually, I think it's been kind of a technical difficulty going on, but it is slated to be in a whole bunch of independent bookstores and also Barnes and Noble as well.
Fantastic. Well, congrats again.
Thank you.
I always end with tea bag wisdom, and I love your cup. I've got mine.
Nice.
And I thought yours would be cheers. I thought that yours would be about art, but it's about, well, I'll just read it. Live light, travel light, spread the light, be the light.
Actually, that's incredibly apropos. And not only the travel part, but there's a lot about light in the book. The Secret Society. The Secret Society is actually kind of a religion, or it's a religious order, really. And they talk a lot about light. There's a lot about light going on. So that's pretty perfect. And by the way, this is the backside of my mug. That is a self-portrait of Tintoretto. He did that.
Ah, well, it's good to meet you.
You too. Oh, Tintoretto, you're saying? Oh.
It's good to meet you too, Rob. I feel like I know you because we've been back and forth a lot. But these tea bags are always right. It's just uncanny.
Yeah.
And
did you not pick that a total coincidence? You didn't look at it until that moment?
Take them out of my yogi teas.
Wow.
And I take the first one for everybody. 2 years. There's some that you have to stretch, 1 or 2 that I had to stretch, but probably the person that I was on the receiving end didn't need to. It was just because they didn't know them very well.
Right.
But thank you so much. It's been my honor and pleasure having you here on the show. And I wish you much luck, not just with The Prisoner of Paradise, with all that will follow. And viewers and readers, thanks for tuning in. Tune in next month for the third Thursday live right here on my author Facebook page. And they're archived here on Facebook as well as my YouTube channel. And I will also say you can find out a little bit more about me and my book at shoresofursouls.com. And I thank you again, Rob. Looking forward to seeing everybody again soon. I want to bid everyone the merriest of Christmases if you celebrate. And I hope Santa's good to everybody. We need it this year. I hope he brings everybody plenty of books, and wishing everybody the happiest of New Year's. Bye for now until 2022.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Kaylee. It's been incredible. And it's all of that right back at you. Same Shores of Our Souls is amazing. I can't wait for 1,000 Flying Things to come out. And I hope you both and everybody watching has an incredible, happy holiday season and an amazing 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great talking with you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.